On today's episode of Inside the Mavs. Now, I couldn't have the NBA Finals and not bring along with me the radio voice of your Dallas Mavericks, the great Chuck Cooperstein, joining me here today on the show for a fascinating conversation around this team, how they got to the NBA Finals, and what we can look forward to when they take on the Boston Celtics. This is Inside the Mavs. Welcome to Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura. I'm your host, Kevin Gray, Mavericks Pre and Post Game host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining us here for the latest episode of Inside the Mavs. Make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And if you watch this on my YouTube channel at Kevin Gray Sports, make sure you like and comment on the video as well. Got to get you ready, of course, for game one of the NBA Finals on Thursday night. The Mavericks back in the finals for the third time in franchise history. And today, joining me on the episode, he is the radio voice of your Dallas Mavericks. You can find him on Twitter at Coops Mavs. He is, of course, Chuck Cooperstein joining me on the show. Chuck, what's going on?
Kevin, it's all good. It's really good.
The vibes are good. The vibes are immaculate these days, I would imagine. Well, I appreciate you hanging out with me on the show today because, I mean, this season has been a hell of a ride from what we experienced at the beginning of the season, the trade deadline, making this run to the NBA Finals. Chuck, if you could describe this season in one or two words, what would they be and why?
Wow, one or two words? Unexpectedly pleasurable.
Yeah.
I think we knew how great Luka was and is, and he certainly measured up to that with a season that has never been seen before in the NBA. I think we saw signs of life last year that despite the bad ending to the season, that Luka and Kyrie actually did work together. The concept could work together, because the numbers suggested that they did. They just needed some better pieces around them. And the fact that they ultimately went out and pretty much did everything right as far as the transaction game is concerned, with the drafting of Derek Lively, who I'm proud to say that the night of the lottery, when we found out the Mavericks were drafting 10th, I tweeted that night. I said, I don't know who they're drafting, but I can't get Derek Lively out of my head as what he might mean for this team. And the machinations and such, they went to get him. One of the very few times in my life that I was right about something. And so that mattered. And even when they made a mistake, and ultimately the Grant Williams sign and trade was a mistake, they rectified the mistake and did it in a major way with a player who's a little younger, a little better, and even got a center to boot to help Lively out, to where, there was that time, like right around the trade deadline, where he had just gotten hurt again, where he had smashed his face and had to undergo surgery. But there were signs that maybe he was hitting the rookie wall, and that he was being relied upon too much by the Mavericks. And so they needed some legitimate inside help, and they went and got that, and to put that together around Luka, and much to the dismay of those who only worry about things that are going to happen 5 and 6 years down the road, as opposed to dealing with the present. I dare say, Kevin, I'm from the school of George Allen, the former Redskins coach, when he said the future is now. And it is, because the future is never guaranteed to you. So when you have the opportunity to go do something about it, you go do something about it. And the Mavericks did. And we knew the team would get better as a result of the moves. I don't think anybody really, if they were strapped up to the lie detector, would tell you that we would be sitting here on June the 3rd and getting ready to talk about a Mavericks trip to the NBA Finals starting 3 days later.
Yeah, I don't think people really appreciate how difficult it is to remake a team on the fly the way that they did, and changing the identity of a group, and then that gel and come together as quickly as it did. I mean, this team, we look back in the most meaningful games, that 18-game stretch where they went 16-2 and they finished their last 33 games 24-9. Like, this team put it all together on the defensive end as well as they did. Were you surprised at the turnaround defensively, the way that they were able to make it and how quickly they were able to really get on the same page to make this kind of run to the finals that they have now?
It's stunning. When have the Mavericks and defense been talked about in the same sentence? Really? I mean, maybe during the championship season when they did have a very good defense, but certainly in recent iterations of the Mavericks, that has not been the case. They've totally sold out on the offensive end of the floor. And even, Jayson Kidd said earlier this season, our best defense is our offense.
Mm-hmm.
And, for a long time it was. But we all know that if you're going to ultimately have a team that can advance to the NBA Finals, you have to be able to strike a balance. You're not going to score 115 points every game. And the rule changes, or should say that maybe the rule interpretations that were changed by the NBA right after Luka went for the 73 in late January, I think actually played to their hands a little bit, especially with the trades that ultimately were made. It made them bigger, it made them more physical, and it allowed more physical play to be accepted and shine. And so that gave them a chance. And with that, I think Luka and Kyrie also bought in to the extent, and I think Luka really had all year long, but people didn't really want to accept it, certainly outside of Dallas-Fort Worth, that not only does he know how to play defense, but he's willing to play defense, and he can excel playing defense. And I think we saw Kyrie in the Clippers series especially, going after James Harden. You have to believe there was something from the Brooklyn experience a couple of years ago that led Kyrie to really want to do something about that. And you throw all of that into the mix, and what you had was the best defense in the NBA really since March the 7th, which, again, it's the Mavericks and defense in the same sentence, and that hasn't happened very often in 44 years.
Yeah, the team's buy-in on that end of the floor really changed the trajectory of this team, and you give them credit because they're two superstars, and Luka and Kyrie, they bought into it, embraced it, and now all of this team is playing the level of defense that you have to play as you make a deep playoff run. And you started to mention, with Luka, specifically with Kyrie, because he's going to be a focal point in this series with the whole storyline with him going back to Boston and what that means for him. But Chuck, what struck me with him is that not only has he embraced what he has been able to do, obviously on the floor, but the leadership that he's displayed on and off the floor for this team. And at this point in his career, willing to provide that to this team has struck me as extraordinary, given what we've learned about Kyrie throughout the years. But what he's been able to impart to this team has been invaluable based off of who he is as a player and as a person, and how he's developed here in Dallas in that way.
I mean, it happens so often in the NBA that you have an impression of someone from the outside, but until you're around him or are available to him or see him even from a distance, but he's with your team, and you see that pretty much every day, your feeling changes dramatically. I'll remember I always had that feeling about Jerry Stackhouse until he came to the Mavericks, and then realized how important he was to those Mavericks teams. For his ability, number one, his selflessness, number two, in having been a big scorer in the NBA, to come off the bench to give the Mavericks that type of lift, and the fact that he had been through that, and he wasn't a selfish player, that he really was a team guy that was interested in winning. And so again, until you're around those guys more regularly, you really don't know. And in Kyrie's case, I think there are several things that are involved here. One, I think everybody does have the right to grow up
Sure.
at some point, and they have the ability to understand that maybe went off the tracks, and there's an ability for them to get back on the tracks. Number two, I think he respects Luka so immensely and respected Luka so immensely, even in the few games that they played against each other, that he wanted to make that work. Thirdly, I think maybe he realized himself that as a lead dog in Boston and maybe to a certain degree in Brooklyn, that was not ultimately what would allow him to best succeed in the NBA. When did he best succeed? When he was playing with LeBron.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now he's playing with Luka. And I was asked the other night, like, is he jealous at all of the notion that, he's a second fiddle guy? And first of all, I don't think the Mavericks look at him as a second fiddle guy, but even if he is a second fiddle guy, I think he sees where his greatest successes have come from. And I do think that he has an inordinate amount of respect from players throughout the league.
Yes.
Whether you're on his team or not. I mean, people around they love Kyrie Irving, and so the fact that he is in a situation where now, he kind of is the Yoda, and he can show these guys the way. And I think so many of them have taken to it, and I think it's really helped the young guys. But I think it's helped Luka. I mean, Luka's still 25. I mean, and his leadership style is still growing, but he's it's still very much his team. And I thought the best example of it was there was I want to say it was Game 5 against Minnesota, where Jaden Hardy had the ball on the left side of the floor, and he was getting ready to just pass it back. Luka had passed it to him, and he was going to pass it right back to Luka, tell him to go do something with it. And Luka just waved at him and said,
"Yeah,
do it. Yours. Go get him. Take him." I mean, how invaluable is that? And I think, and I guarantee you that Kyrie had some influence on Luka, and that then has influence on a guy like Hardy, who clearly has become a pretty important factor here as we've gone through the Minnesota series and into the finals.
Yeah, and watching the two of them, you have the fire with Luka, you've got kind of the ice with Kyrie Irving, and the way that they've been able to gel and put themselves in position to help this team grow has been a lot of fun to watch. And we'll come back to Luka here in a little bit because
I just want to make the point too that to me, when Kyrie was acquired, the analogy for me, being the old man that I am and having seen a lot of basketball in my life, was when the New York Knicks acquired Earl Monroe from the Baltimore Bullets back in 1973 or 1972, actually. And the question was, oh my God, they got Earl, but they already got Clyde. How is that possibly going to work? Well, it worked because they both wanted it to work. And you had Gail Goodrich and Jerry West in Los Angeles with the Lakers, and that's just another example again from a long time ago. But the bottom line being, you can never have too many great players, and yes, it does take a subjugation of ego on some level in order for it to work. Maybe this was more on Kyrie than it was on Luka, but at the same time, the fact is, whatever had to change in order for it to work, whatever adjustment had to be made was made, and you have what you have now as certainly one of the most explosive backcourts that this league has ever seen.
Yeah, and for folks like Stan Van Gundy, maybe the greatest offensive backcourt we may have ever seen in terms of Luka and Kyrie, because of just the sheer offensive production that we've seen from them. But it's been on the other end of the floor that has really caught people's attention, because you've got to be able to win, on both ends to be able to win deep into the postseason. And we'll come back to Luka in a little bit, because we could spend all day talking about Luka in the season that he's had. But before we get there, because you've talked about some of the young guys, whether it be a Jaden Hardy being able to have a little bit of an impact, especially in the playoffs so far when he's got the opportunities to. But Chuck, when this team acquired PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, and you mentioned Derek Lively earlier as well, those three gentlemen and the difference that they've made, along with signing Derrick Jones Jr., who was the last roster signing before the season started, the others on this team have fit into their roles perfectly to be able to help this team go alongside Luka and Kyrie, which, again, you've got to have if you're going to make a championship run, is the others understanding those roles. And these guys have done it perfectly to the point where they have now made a finals run at this case.
they could not have fit more perfectly. Now, I will say that I thought that Gafford was going to work. I knew he'd work just in the pick and roll game with Luka, as ability as a shot blocker, a top 10 shot blocker in the league. And, maybe you're somewhat jaded by when you see a player in person as opposed to, the other 80 games that he might play during the course of the season. But it seemed like every time that Gafford played against the Mavericks, he killed him. He just killed him, whether
Yeah,
it's
he did.
dunks or blocks or just really affecting the game as a big. I knew that would help because you just can't have enough rim protection. And one of the Mavericks' biggest issues was, even with Lively, and had been for years, their rebounding, where last year they were historically awful rebounding team. So to get somebody like that in here was really helpful. Washington, to me, was a bit more iffy. Even though he's got that combination of length and athleticism that scouts love, and the whole analytics thing that goes along with that, but he had been a terrible shooter. He really didn't guard very well in Charlotte. He didn't stand out, and maybe should he have stood out more on a bad team, but it never seemed like he did. But he also had some very good games against the Mavericks over the last couple of years. But for him, the issue was we want a 3-and-D guy. We want a guy who can guard. Now, again, he's playing more against fours than he is against threes, but a guy who can guard, but who can also step out and shoot threes. Well, his three-point shooting was bad, and that's being kind in Charlotte.
Yeah.
It was terrible. And he's playing, at least for as many games as he could, with a guy like LaMelo Ball, who could certainly set you up in the way that Luka has the ability to set you up. But that never happened for him here. And I really wondered, would it ever really happen here? And frankly, even when he had his moments in the few weeks after the trade, it was really that Golden State game at home at the end of the regular season when he scored 32 points and he knocked down a bunch of threes, big threes. That was really the first sign that okay, he's built to play in a big game, because that was really an important game, and he's doing exactly what he had to do in order to give the Mavericks their best chance to win, which was knock down three-pointers. And so we get to the playoffs, and he kind of up and down in the Clippers series, but the series against Oklahoma City, you could not have asked more out of him, especially in games 2 through 4. He didn't shoot the three well in the Minnesota series, and I think that's going to be a huge part of this series upcoming. He was 8 of 32 from 3 against Minnesota. The Celtics do not allow many corner 3 opportunities. The Mavericks create more corner opportunities than any team in the league. And that's, I think, one of the underlying themes here of the series. But when it's there for PJ, he's going to have to be able to make that shot. But again, with everything else that he's brought to the table, and he's brought some attitude, which this team at times has not had. Remember the game in Detroit in early March when Isaiah Stewart went after Daniel Gafford, and there was PJ running in, and you're not going to mess with my guy. And we've seen that a couple of times since then, and that's certainly different from what we've seen from Mavericks teams of not only just recent vintage, but even going back. I mean, you probably have to go back into the title years, and in that period of time, to find that guy who was going to put his head in there and say, no, this is absolutely unacceptable. And maybe that's also helped their defensive mindset as well, because no, this is not acceptable. You are not going to get by me. You are not going to get. I'm going to gobble you up defensively. I'm going to hurt you defensively. And I think that, so from that standpoint, and maybe we haven't talked about that enough as everything is unfolded here coming to the playoffs. That's been a huge part of why the Mavericks are what they are right now.
Yeah, an attitude change for the better, bringing that intensity, that consistent intensity, especially on the defensive end. PJ has stood on business, if you will, throughout the course of this season and provided that, especially since coming to the Dallas Mavericks. Let's take a quick break here on Inside the Mavs. More with Chuck Cooperstein as we get you ready for Game 1 of the NBA Finals. And, of course, Luka Doncic making his first ever appearance in the finals. But before we get there, let's hear from today's sponsor of our video and our podcast. Let's hear from Aura. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs, thank you for hanging out with us at this spot, and thank you to today's sponsor of our video and our podcast in Aura, with the radio voice of your Dallas Mavericks, Chuck Cooperstein, joining me here on the Inside the Mavs podcast. We get you ready for Game 1 of this NBA Finals between your Mavericks and the Boston Celtics. And Chuck, before we get to the series itself, want to focus in on Luka because, for him at 25 years of age, 5-time All-Star, 5-time first-team All-NBA selection, scoring champion, looking to become the first scoring champion since Shaq did it back in the 99-2000 season to win an NBA championship, and, of course, had the 73-point game, had the 50-point game on Christmas Day. You get the idea. He's pretty damn good. And now he has a chance in his first NBA Finals on this stage to continue to put together what I've told folks that, one of the greatest starts to an NBA career that we've seen maybe ever, with all the accolades that he's put together. How are you feeling about his opportunity to be able to showcase who he is as a player and as a person on this final stage for the very first time?
I could not be more confident in his ability to deliver in the moment, and especially to deliver in the moment on the road. I think the more you yell at him, the happier he gets, the more willing he's ready to throw it right back in your face. And I think certainly we've seen that in the Minnesota series, but there's we've seen it a lot. Saw it in the Phoenix series and certainly in Game 7, against the Suns. I mean, the bigger the moment, it seems, the better he plays. And all this is, Kevin, is a continuation of something that's been going on for the last 10 years. Becoming a professional at age 15 at Real Madrid and playing on the team that is the best in the best domestic league in the world, in the ACB in Spain, and winning a championship there and winning the most valuable player there, and then going on to the best tournament in the world outside of the NBA playoffs, the EuroLeague, and winning the EuroLeague championship with the Real Madrid before he was drafted by the Mavericks. This stuff is ordained. I believe that. And it has been, again, for the last 10 years. And look, it's not always the smoothest path to get there. But, I mean, you look at what he's achieved at such a young age. And it's remarkable to me. And it's remarkable to me that people would see his brilliance and somehow try to minimize that brilliance. So when you get to this stage, when really you have no choice as a basketball fan, whether they be casual or you and me, or the general public, or people around the NBA who maybe don't see him all the time, from a media standpoint, who don't see him all the time, you'll have no choice for at least the next 4 games and probably the next 7 games to watch this guy do his thing and do it in a manner that very, very few, if any, people have ever done. So, I'm completely convinced of Luka's brilliance and his ability to rise to the challenge. And more importantly, from the Mavericks standpoint, I'm fully convinced of his ability to bring people along for the ride. That as he gets excited, that gets everybody else excited, and they're going to play at a higher level too.
Yeah, and I was thinking about, the parallels, and it's hard not to, the parallels of the 2011 championship team into this one, and kind of going through some of them. Obviously, Jason Kidd, the head coach of this team, was the point guard and starting guard for the Mavericks in that championship team. You got your superstar with Dirk Nowitzki. You got your superstar with Luka Doncic. Even if you want to get real granular with it, you got a starting forward from UNLV like you had with Sean Marion, with Derrick Jones Jr. starting forward for your Dallas Mavericks from UNLV. Like the parallels, I could go Tyson Chandler. Like there's so many that are there. But for this group heading up against this Boston team, who has been a juggernaut all season long, last time these two teams saw each other was back on March 1st. The Celtics won, by 28 points that night. Jayson Tatum had over 30 points in each of the 2 games that they've played. But for this group going up against Boston, what is your 1 or 2 things that you are really focusing on this series that the Mavericks have got to do well in order to find themselves winning against Boston in this series?
Well, I don't take much from the March 1st game because that was in the midst of the Mavericks losing 5 out of 6 and giving up 129 a game and having literally no idea what they were doing out there on defense.
And the Celtics were in the middle of a 10-game winning streak. That was their 10th straight win that they won that night.
Exactly. And then, the next week, literally, after losing 2 more games to Philadelphia and Indiana, was when the big change came. And even in that game, and people forget this, they were playing Miami, and they were down 15 in the first quarter, and they were getting booed off the floor. And, Miami was on its way to shooting like 70% in the quarter, and you're thinking it's going to be more of the same. And then the light switch went on, and we have now what we have. So it makes it in some ways even more remarkable coming out of that Boston game. And even in the first Boston game, which again was a 9-point game but wasn't really competitive. Remember, Kyrie got hurt on the first play of the game.
That's right.
He drove, and Jayson Tatum banged his thumb, and he played the rest of the game with a sprained thumb and missed the next 6 games after that. So, I mean, there's always a little something here. You definitely could take something out of it, where the Mavericks look, they have to be more physical. And I think if they weren't physical in either one of those games, they're a lot more physical team now. So I think that will help negate some of what's going on there. So for me, and I think I mentioned it earlier, one of the things that's going to be really important, Luka loves to get into the lane and basically have people collapse on him, and then he winds up flaring it out to the corner, and the 3-pointers are taken. Again, the Mavericks take more 3-pointers from the corner than anybody else. Boston allows fewer 3-pointers from the corner than anybody else, and when they take them, nobody makes them. In fact, I saw the note the other day; they're making 18.5% against the Celtics from the corner in the postseason. So it's just nuts. Obviously, the Mavericks are going to have to be a lot better than that. And they've been better than that in the playoffs after they were not good that way in the regular season. They were 27th in the league in the regular season. That's a huge part of the game. But also, not even so much spraying out for the threes, but we saw it in Game 5 where Luka decided, you know what, if I get in the lane and I'm below the dotted line, I'm going to shoot the floater, or I'm going to get all the way to the rim. And the fact that he's making his free throws as he's making 81% in the playoffs, which is, again, well above the season average and the best ever in his career. That makes it far more problematic for the defense. What do I defend? And so I think we need that type of aggressiveness from Luka. I think we need some first quarter aggressiveness from Kyrie. Don't necessarily let the game come to him. And I think that, the games in Boston are going to be really interesting because the Celtic fans are going to be all over his butt. He's not won a game in Boston since he stepped on the leprechaun. back in 2021, they've lost 10. He's lost his last 10 games against Boston. And his numbers have been pretty average, like 20.8 points and 42% shooting, 36% from three. And obviously, Kyrie's numbers are a lot better than that. So he's going to have to find his way, through all of that. That's a huge part. And then, defensively, how do they? I'm going to assume that Porzingis is going to play. How are they going to really deal, with him? I think he's really a different type of player. You're not just 5 out with Porzingis because you can throw it to him down low. How do Lively and Gafford deal with him? And then when he does go out to the perimeter, can they play out there without fouling? I think that's going to be a huge part. Boston doesn't foul at all. Boston is like, it's their fouls per game and their free throw attempts per field goal attempts are like extraordinarily low, like 3 or 4 lowest of all time.
And they don't turn the ball over. They were the nuts
and they don't turn over the ball. So from Dallas's standpoint, they've actually shot more free throws in the playoffs than they did during the regular season, which is, given how the games have been called, is actually kind of a surprise. And I'm sure for Mavericks fans who think that their guys are just getting bludgeoned on every time down the floor and should be shooting free throws all the time, they actually are shooting a few more now than they did during the regular season. But, how do you keep Boston from making 16 to 23s a game? How do you do that? Because they're going to take 40 to 45 threes. I mean, that they have decided to play the math game to the highest degree. And they have everybody in their rotation who can shoot the three-pointer and shoots it at a pretty high percentage. So, I don't know where, what the matchup is in particular, but they have to be able to find a way to run those guys off the line and make them shoot a few mid-rangers. And if they don't want to shoot mid-rangers and go to the rim, make sure that Gafford and Lively are there to defend the rim and make them miss.
Yeah, and it's funny because the things that Boston can do, they've got a couple of guys obviously with Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown that both can find their ways to the rim, and what the matchup with PJ Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. having and watching them guard individually against them, the team defense is going to have to be strong because at times Brown and Tatum are going to find their ways to the basket. How do Gafford and Lively particularly react in there, as you mentioned, to make sure that they're defending without fouling, because they've needed Gafford and Lively on the floor, the two of them, when they're playing that combined 48 minutes, with evenly being distributed there, the production both offensively and defensively is huge for the Mavericks. And maybe that's a point of advantage for the Mavericks, is the physicality of which they can play within the interior on the offense, and especially when they get that vertical game going. Maybe that's something that they could take advantage of against Boston.
And Maxi Kleber could be really important in this series too, because some of the best lineups that the Mavericks have been when Kleber has played with either one of those centers. Now, they can play the 5-out game and have Kleber play the 5, but I think defensively that would hurt the Mavericks more. But if Kleber is there as a 5 and providing additional size on the perimeter, as well as whatever he can bring in help side defense and what have you, I think he becomes important. And then on the other side, he's coming off a shoulder, and he seemed pretty reluctant to shoot in the 2 games against Minnesota that he played. He's had a lot more time to heal, and I would imagine that we could see a lot more of Game 5 Maxey against the Clippers in this series, and that could be something that not a lot of people are counting on right now, but could ultimately wind up being pretty important.
Last thing for our show today, as we get ready for this series, what for you is going to be your overarching theme of this series about why the Mavericks win this series? They do what if they win this series? They do what they won't do if they don't win this series. What are those things for you in your mind?
Well, I think there are going to be several close games in this series, and the Mavericks have been the best clutch team in the NBA, pretty much all season long. I mean, a half game behind the Lakers during the regular season, and their ability to perform under pressure has been really notable. And I think, now the Celtics were able to do what they did against Indiana, and that's impressive in and of itself. But again, I think the games are going to be pretty competitive here. So, who handles the last 5 minutes better is going to be really large. But, offensively from the Mavericks standpoint, as I mentioned, it's really on Luka and Kyrie to be who they are and
Yeah.
who we believe them to be. And defensively, they're going up against people with size, which has not always been the case in the first 3 rounds. And understand that it may take a game again, and this could frustrate the heck out of Maverick fans, having seen the Mavericks basically go 1-5 in the kid era in game ones, but they've been so good in just like, okay, this is what's happening here. This is how they're playing, and okay, so we're going to figure this out. We're going to do that.
They're great counterpunchers.
they're great counterpunchers, and so I think that's going to be a large part of the series. I think the coaches are a large part of the series because both of them have been significantly criticized in their 2 and 3 years as head coaches. I mean, Joe Mazzulla won 121 games. He's been in the Eastern Conference Finals and the Finals, and there are a lot of guys who still think he can't coach. And as we know in Dallas, Jayson's been criticized quite a bit in his 3 years of, primarily with rotations and, who should play and who shouldn't play and this, that, and the other. But I think what we've seen at this level is that kid has played some grandmaster chess that Bobby Fischer would be very proud of.
For sure.
He's put his opponents in some really difficult positions, and as a result has helped his team get into far better positions in order to win games. And I think that's something to keep an eye on too.
Mavericks 7-2 on the road, so Boston better be careful. You better bring your A game because this is a team that can win.
And to that end, though, Boston is 6-0 on the road. So
yes.
And what's crazy, Kevin, is that in the last 2 rounds, the home team is 16-18. And as much as we want to believe that home court matters, and that the American Airlines Center will be nuts next Wednesday and Friday for games 3 and 4, I'm not really sure that it does matter. Maybe outside of the first few minutes of, say, game 1 and game 3. When everybody's just so hepped up. But it's not like it used to be. It's not like when you walked into the old Boston Garden in June and there's no air conditioning and there's smoke all over the place, right? And you're looking up at the banners and you're seeing Russell and Casey Jones and Auerbach and all those people that were parts of the Celtic dynasty. The Celtics have 1 championship in 38 years. I mean, for all of their consistency, they have not been able to take the final step in the last 16 years. And again, only 1 time since 1984. So it's going to be really, really interesting from that standpoint that, the Celtics are not going to be intimidated coming to Dallas. And I don't think the Mavericks are going to be intimidated playing in Boston. Even the parquet floor is not the same. Okay, there aren't dead spots here the way it used to be. So.
It's a little different. It's a little different these days, for sure. Chuck, tell the folks where they can find you. What we can expect from you as far as your coverage and what we can look forward to in the NBA Finals.
Okay. Well, I'm on Twitter at Coop Mavs. I'm on Facebook. Don't do much else. I'm a Luddite in many ways, but I have figured out those 2 things. But obviously, our games are locally in Dallas-Fort Worth on 97.1 The Eagle. You can get us on the iHeart app. All the games will be on Sirius XM. The home games will be on the NBA channel, Channel 86. The road games, I believe, will be on Channel 212. And NBA.com Audio League Pass is also available. So there are lots of ways to get us. Brad Davis will be with the home games, and Brian Damaris will be with me on the road. And I can't wait. I was thinking that when the Mavericks were last in the finals in 2011, it was also scheduled to start on a Thursday. But because the Mavericks and Heat finished their series so quickly that they actually moved up the start of the series to 2 days earlier, to that Tuesday. Well, they didn't do it this time. And I tell you what, I mean, we should have been on a plane today, right? Or Sunday, and the media day should have been today, Monday, and then play game 1 on Tuesday night. But TV would not allow that to happen. So here we are, just hanging out, and we're all just our stomachs are turning. And as Tom Petty famously said, the waiting's the hardest part.
Well, the waiting will be over very, very soon, and we can't wait to get there. And looking forward to this NBA Finals between your Dallas Mavericks and the Boston Celtics. Game 1 Thursday night. You can check everything out, of course, on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. That'll do it for this episode of Inside the Mavs. Thank you again to the radio voice of your Dallas Mavericks, Chuck Cooperstein, for joining me on this episode here. Make sure you download and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast for free. Give it a 5-star rating, write a review for it while you're there. And you can also find us on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. For Chuck Cooperstein, my name is Kevin Gray. This has been Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura.